In the glittering heart of 1920s, London's Gaiety Theatre, a star falls. Behind the crimson curtain, Edmund Vane, the celebrated actor, lies dead, a dagger in his heart, struck in 10 seconds of darkness. Was it the envious co-star, Clara Beaumont, burning for his role? The volatile director, Lionel Gray, whose blackout set the stage for murder? Or the silent stagehand, Tom Wheeler, hiding a bitter grudge? Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of envy and betrayal, where every clue, a grease stain, a hidden handkerchief, leads to a shocking confession. In this theatre of secrets, only one truth will take centre stage. Chapter 1. The Final Bow. The Gaiety Theatre, nestled in the glittering heart of London's West End, thrummed with the electric anticipation of a premiere. Its façade, adorned with gilded cornices and gas-lit lanterns, glowed against the October dusk of 1925. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood, velvet upholstery, and the faint musk of grease paint. The audience, a tapestry of silk gowns and black ties, murmured excitedly, their programs rustling like autumn leaves. The Scarlet Mask, a new drama penned by a rising playwright, promised a night of intrigue, and its star, Edmund Vane, was the darling of the theatrical world, a man whose voice could hush a room and whose presence commanded the stage. In a private box overlooking the auditorium, Hercule Poirot sat with his friend, Captain Arthur Hastings. Poirot, immaculate in his evening dress, his patent leather shoes gleaming, adjusted his bow tie with a fastidious flick of his fingers. His small, neat figure seemed almost out of place amid the opulence, yet his sharp green eyes missed nothing. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but precise, "there is a certain symmetry in a theatre, non? The stage, it is a mirror of life, full of pretense, yet revealing truth to those who observe closely." Hastings, a man of straightforward tastes, grinned. "I say, Poirot, you're waxing poetic tonight. I'm just here to enjoy the show. Edmund Vane's meant to be splendid, isn't he?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or perhaps skepticism. "Splendid, oui, but even the brightest stars cast shadows, Hastings." The house lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. The crimson curtain, heavy and rich as claret, quivered as if holding its breath. The orchestra struck a haunting chord, and the curtain began its slow ascent. For a moment, the stage was a void of darkness, the opening scene designed to unfold in shadow before a spotlight would reveal Edmund Vane in his crimson cloak, poised to deliver the play's first soliloquy. But the silence stretched too long. A faint rustle, like fabric brushing wood, broke the stillness, followed by a gasp, a sharp, human sound that did not belong to the script. Then, a scream. Piercing, raw, it tore through the auditorium, sending a ripple of unease through the audience. Woman in the stalls clutched her companion's arm, whispering, "Is that part of the play?" But before anyone could answer, the stage lights flared to life, revealing a tableau of horror. There, centre stage, lay Edmund Vane, his body crumpled like a discarded marionette. His white shirt, meant to gleam beneath his costume, was marred by a spreading stain of scarlet, vivid against the pale fabric. A dagger, its blade catching the light, lay beside him, its handle smeared with blood. The crimson curtain framed the scene, as if the theatre itself had conspired to present this grim spectacle. The audience erupted in confusion. Some laughed nervously, expecting a dramatic flourish, while others whispered in alarm. A young man in the balcony stood, shouting, Good heavens, is he dead? The stage manager, a wiry figure named Mr. Pritchard, stumbled from the wings, his face ashen. "Lower the curtain," he barked, but his voice trembled. "Call a doctor. Someone, call the police." The curtain descended with a heavy thud, sealing the tragedy from view. But the murmurs in the auditorium grew to a roar. Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of a hawk. "Hastings," he said, his voice low and urgent. "This is no theatrical ruse. A crime has been committed before our very eyes." He rose, his small frame radiating authority. "Come, we must descend to the stage. The police will arrive. But Hercule Poirot does not wait for others to uncover the truth." Hastings followed, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and excitement. They navigated the narrow stairs to the stage door, where ushers were already struggling to calm the crowd. Backstage, the atmosphere was one of barely contained panic. Actors in half-donned costumes milled about, their faces pale beneath their makeup. Stage hands whispered in corners, their eyes darting toward the heavy curtain. Mr. Pritchard, wringing his hands, was attempting to restore order when Poirot approached. "Monsieur Pritchard," Poirot said, his tone courteous but firm. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my friend Captain Hastings. Permit me to assist until the authorities arrive. Tell me, what has occurred?" Pritchard, his bald head glistening with sweat, stammered. "It's Mr. Vane, sir. He was meant to start the scene. But during the blackout, those few seconds of darkness, he was stabbed. I heard the scream, and when the lights came up..." His voice broke, and he gestured helplessly toward the curtain. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "The blackout, you say? How long did it last?" 10 seconds, perhaps 12, Pritchard replied. "It was scripted to build suspense, but someone must have used it to..." He stopped, his eyes wide with realization. "Précisément," Poirot said softly. "Someone who knew the rhythm of the play, the moment of darkness. This was no accident." He turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, we are in a world of illusion, but murder is real. Let us find Inspector Japp when he arrives, for I suspect this stage holds secrets that only the little grey cells can unravel." As the distant wail of the police sirens pierced the night, Poirot's gaze lingered on the crimson curtain, its folds now still, hiding the truth of Edmund Vane's final bow. The game, as he would call it, had begun. Chapter 2. The players assemble. The Gaiety Theatre, now a silent monument to tragedy, lay under the stern watch of the London constabulary. The audience had been ushered out into the chilly October night, their whispers of shock and speculation trailing behind them like ghosts. Backstage, the air was thick with tension, the usual bustle of a premiere replaced by an eerie stillness, broken only by the creak of floorboards and the low murmur of anxious voices. The crimson curtain, lowered to shield the grim scene, hung like a bloodied shroud, its folds concealing the stage where Edmund Vane had met his end. Hercule Poirot, his small, immaculate figure, a stark contrast to the disarray, stood at the center of this new drama, his sharp green eyes scanning the faces around him with the precision of a watchmaker. Captain Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, felt the weight of the moment. His practical mind struggled to reconcile the glamour of the theatre with the stark reality of murder. "I say, Poirot," he whispered, "this is a grim business. Poor Vane, stabbed in the middle of his big moment. Who'd do such a thing?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint sign of his thoughts stirring. Who, mon ami? That is the question. But fear not, for Hercule Poirot will find the answer in the shadows of this stage. The police, led by the familiar figure of Inspector Japp, had arrived with their usual efficiency. Japp, a stout man with a bulldog's tenacity, spotted Poirot and gave a wry smile. "Well, well, if it isn't Mr. Poirot, can't seem to keep you away from a corpse, can I?" His tone was gruff but warm, a testament to their long acquaintance. "What's your take on this mess?" Poirot inclined his head, his expression grave. "A murder, Inspector, committed with audacity in the brief darkness of a blackout. The killer knew the theatre, the play, the moment. This was no impulse. It was planned, and we must discover by whom and why." Japp nodded, his pencil already scribbling in a worn notebook. "Right then, let's round up the likely suspects and see what they've got to say." The green room, a cosy space cluttered with mirrors, costumes, and the faint scent of face powder, became the stage for Poirot's inquiry. Its walls, lined with faded posters of past triumphs, seemed to watch as the key players were assembled. 3 figures whose lives had intersected with Edmund Vane's in ways that now bore scrutiny. Poirot, with his innate sense of order, arranged chairs in a semicircle, as if directing a scene of his own. Hastings, Japp, and a young constable stood by, the latter poised to take notes. The suspects, each a study in contrasts, entered one by one, their faces betraying a mix of shock, defiance, and unease. First came Lionel Gray, the director, a man in his late 40s whose wiry frame seemed coiled with restless energy. His hair, streaked with silver, was dishevelled, and his cravat hung loose, as if he had tugged at it in agitation. Gray's reputation as a visionary was matched only by his notorious temper, and his dark eyes flashed with a mix of grief and indignation as he sat. "This is a catastrophe," he declared, his voice resonant with the cadence of the stage. "Edmund was the heart of the Scarlet Mask. To lose him like this, it's unthinkable." Poirot regarded him with a calm that seemed to unnerve the director. "Monsieur Gray, you were close to Monsieur Van, non? A director and his star, they share a bond, a vision." His tone was polite, but his eyes were unyielding, searching for the truth beneath Gray's theatricality. Gray shifted in his chair, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "Close. In a professional sense, yes. Edmund was brilliant, but he could be difficult. Always improvising, changing lines, upstaging his fellows. It drove me mad at times, I'll admit. But murder? Absurd." His voice rose, and he gestured expansively, as if addressing an audience rather than a detective. "And where were you, monsieur, during the blackout?" Poirot asked, his head tilted slightly, like a bird studying its prey. "In the lighting booth," Gray replied promptly. "I was overseeing the transition. The blackout was my idea. 10 seconds of darkness to heighten the drama before Edmund's entrance. I was with the stage manager, Mr. Pritchard, and the lighting crew. They'll confirm it." His tone was confident, but Poirot noted a faint tremor in his hands, a crack in his polished demeanour. "Indeed," Poirot said softly, "we shall verify. But tell me, did you resent Monsieur Vane's liberties with your script? A director's vision is sacred, non?" Gray's jaw tightened, and for a moment his eyes flickered to the door, as if seeking escape. "Resent? Perhaps, but I'd sooner rewrite a scene than kill a man." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and dismissed Gray with a courteous wave. Next entered Clara Beaumont, the leading lady, whose entrance was a performance in itself. At 30, she was a vision of elegance, her auburn hair swept into an artful chignon, her silk gown shimmering under the gaslight. Her eyes, a striking hazel, glistened with unshed tears, yet there was a calculated grace in her movements, as if she was still playing a role. She sank into the chair with a sigh, her hands clasped demurely in her lap. "Oh, Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice soft but clear. "This is a nightmare. Edmund and I were such friends. To think someone could do this." She trailed off, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Poirot's gaze was gentle, but piercing. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, you have my sympathies, but let us be precise. You were on stage during the blackout, preparing for your entrance, oui?" Clara nodded, her expression one of delicate sorrow. "Yes, I was in the wings, adjusting my costume. The blackout came, and it was so dark, I could barely see my own hands. Then that awful scream." She shuddered, her performance flawless, yet Poirot sensed a note of artifice. "And you saw nothing, heard nothing, in those 10 seconds of darkness?" he pressed, his voice deceptively mild. Clara shook her head. "Nothing, Mr. Poirot. The stage was chaos, actors moving, props shifting. Anyone could have slipped in and out." Her eyes met his briefly, then darted away, and Poirot made a mental note of her composure. Too perfect, perhaps, for one truly shaken. "Tell me, mademoiselle," he continued, "was there harmony between you and Monsieur Vane? The stage, it is a place of passion, but also of rivalry." Clara's smile faltered, a fleeting crack in her facade. "We were professionals," she said firmly. "Of course there were tensions. Every production has them. But I admired Edmund. He was irreplaceable." The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, and Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. Finally, Tom Wheeler, the stagehand, slouched into the room. A man in his early 30s, he was broad-shouldered and weathered, his rough hands stained with the grime of backstage labor. His eyes, a dull grey, avoided Poirot's gaze, fixed instead on the floor. His threadbare jacket and scuffed boots spoke of a hard life, and his silence was a wall that invited curiosity. "Mr. Wheeler," Poirot began, his tone encouraging, "you are the unseen heart of the theatre, no? You move in the shadows, making the magic possible. What did you see tonight?" Wheeler shrugged, his voice low and gravelly. "Didn't see nothing. I was backstage, moving a prop flat for the next scene. Heard the scream, same as everyone." His words were clipped, his manner defensive, and Poirot's interest sharpened. "You were near the stage, then?" he asked. Wheeler hesitated, then nodded. "Close enough, but not by the curtain. I keep to my work." Hastings, leaning against the wall, whispered to Japp, "He's a cagey one, isn't he?" Poirot, overhearing, smiled faintly. "Monsieur Wheeler, you are a man who observes much but speaks little. Yet the theatre is a small world. Had you no connection to Monsieur Vane?" Wheeler's jaw tightened, and for a moment his hands clenched. "Know him as the star, that's all," he muttered. But Poirot sensed a lie, a thread to be pulled later. With the interviews concluded, Poirot dismissed the suspects, instructing them to remain in the theatre. He turned to Japp, his expression thoughtful. "Inspector, we have 3 players, each with a motive, perhaps. Monsieur Gray, whose vision was challenged by Vane's ego. Mademoiselle Beaumont, whose ambition may have burned brighter than her tears suggest. And Monsieur Wheeler, whose silence hides a story we must uncover." Japp scratched his chin. "Sounds like a tangled web, Poirot. Any early hunches?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. Hunches, non. But observations, oui. The blackout was the key. A moment of darkness planned by Gray, exploited by the killer. We must learn who knew of it, who could move in those 10 seconds with such deadly precision. Hastings, ever eager, piped up. What about the dagger? It's a prop, isn't it? Someone must have swapped it for a real one. Poirot nodded approvingly. Précisément, Hastings. The dagger, the blackout, the stage itself, they are pieces of a puzzle. But the heart of this crime lies in the human soul. Envy, perhaps, or hatred, or fear. We shall see. As the group moved toward the stage, Poirot paused by a rack of costumes, his fingers brushing the crimson cloak Vane was to have worn. "This theatre," he murmured, "it is a place of illusion, where truth is masked by artifice. But Hercule Poirot sees through masks, and the little grey cells will find the one who turned this stage into a grave." The green room fell silent, save for the distant echo of footsteps in the wings. The investigation had begun, and Poirot, with his unerring instinct, knew that the truth lay not in the spotlight, but in the shadows where secrets whispered. Chapter 3. The director's vision, the gaiety. Theatre, its grandeur now dimmed by the shadow of murder, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot moved through its backstage labyrinth. The narrow corridors, lined with ropes, pulleys, and half-painted flats, were a world apart from the polished auditorium, a realm where illusion was crafted in sweat and sawdust. The crimson curtain, still lowered, loomed like a silent sentinel, guarding the stage where Edmund Vane's life had been extinguished. Poirot, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the worn floorboards, was a figure of meticulous purpose, his mind already weaving through the tangle of motives and alibis presented in the green room. Captain Hastings trailed behind, his honest face creased with concern. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, "this place gives me the creeps now. All these dark corners. Makes you wonder who was lurking about during that blackout." Poirot paused, his head tilted as if listening to the theatre itself. "Précisément, mon ami. The theatre is a place of secrets, and this one has whispered a crime to us. We must listen closely to hear its truth." Inspector Japp, clipboard in hand, joined them near the stage manager's desk, where a clutter of scripts and timetables lay scattered. "Right, Poirot," he said, his voice brisk but tinged with weariness. "I've got constables searching the dressing rooms and the prop room. That dagger's real enough, sharp as a razor, not some stage toy. Someone swapped it before the show, no question." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming with interest. "The dagger, oui, it is a clue. But first, let us speak again with Monsieur Lionel Gray. His role as director places him at the heart of this drama, and I sense his story is not yet complete." Lionel Gray was summoned to the stage manager's office, a cramped space smelling of ink and stale coffee. The director entered with a flourish, his silver-streaked hair still dishevelled, his eyes flashing with a mix of defiance and exhaustion. He wore a velvet jacket, its cuffs frayed from years of gesturing grandly at rehearsals, and his cravat, now retied, was slightly askew, a detail Poirot noted with a faint twitch of his moustache. Gray sank into a chair, his hands gripping the armrests, as if to anchor himself. "Mr. Poirot," he began, his voice resonant but strained, "I trust you're making progress. This tragedy is a blow to the theatre, to my work, to everything I've built." Poirot, seated opposite, folded his hands neatly in his lap, his posture impeccable. "Monsieur Gray, Your passion for your art is evident. But let us speak plainly. Edmund Vane, he was a star, oui, but one who challenged your authority. His improvisations, his changes to the script, did they not provoke your temper? His tone was gentle, almost conversational, but his eyes were sharp as a blade. Gray's face flushed, and he leaned forward, his voice rising. Provoke? Of course they did. Edmund had a habit of treating my script as a suggestion, not a blueprint. He'd add lines, shift blocking, steal focus from others. It was maddening. I spent months crafting the Scarlet Mask to be a masterpiece, and he— Gray caught himself, exhaling sharply. But I didn't kill him, if that's what you're driving at. I'm a director, not a murderer. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. And yet, monsieur, you were in a position to control the stage. This blackout, this critical moment of darkness, it was your creation, non? Gray nodded, his fingers drumming nervously. Yes, I added it last week. It was a dramatic choice to plunge the audience into suspense before Edmund's entrance. 10 seconds of total darkness, then the spotlight on him. It was meant to be breathtaking. 10 seconds, Poirot repeated softly, as if savouring the words. Enough time, perhaps, for a swift hand to strike. Tell me, who knew of this change? Gray hesitated, his eyes flickering to the side. The stage manager, Mr. Pritchard, and the lighting crew, naturally. I mentioned it at the final rehearsal, so the cast would have known. Clara, the others. It wasn't a secret. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Not a secret, yet perfectly timed for murder. Curious, no? Gray bristled, his voice sharp. See here, Mr. Poirot. I was in the lighting booth when it happened. Pritchard and the technician, Jenkins, were with me. They'll tell you, I never left. Poirot nodded, his smile polite but enigmatic. We shall confirm, monsieur. But tell me, what was your relationship with Vane beyond the stage? Was there a personal grievance, perhaps? Gray's hands stilled, and for a moment a shadow crossed his face. Personal? Number. We argued about art, not life. Edmund was difficult, but he was my star. His talent was worth the trouble. His words were firm, but Poirot detected a note of restraint, as if Gray were choosing his words with care. The detective made a mental note, his mind already turning to the next piece of the puzzle. As Gray was dismissed, Poirot turned to Japp and Hastings, who had been listening intently. "What do you make of him, Poirot?" Japp asked, scratching his chin. "Bit of a hothead, but his alibi sounds solid." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Solid, perhaps, but not unbreakable. The lighting booth is not far from the stage, and 10 seconds is a long time for a man who knows his theatre. We must verify with Monsieur Pritchard and this Jenkins." Hastings, ever eager to contribute, ventured, "Gray's got the motive, hasn't he?" "All that talk about Vane ruining his masterpiece sounds like a man pushed to the edge." Poirot shook his head gently. "Motive, oui. But motive alone does not make a murderer. We must consider the means and the opportunity. The blackout was Gray's design, but was it his weapon, or did another seize it?" The trio moved to the lighting booth, a cramped perch high above the stage, reached by a narrow iron ladder. The booth was a chaos of levers, switches, and scribbled notes, its single window offering a clear view of the stage below. Mr. Pritchard, the stage manager, was there, his bald head gleaming under the dim bulb as he sorted through a stack of cue sheets. He looked up, startled, as Poirot entered. "Mr. Poirot, Inspector," he stammered. "This is a terrible night. I keep thinking I could have stopped it somehow." Poirot's smile was reassuring. Monsieur Pritchard, you are not to blame, but you can aid us. Tell me, was Monsieur Gray with you during the blackout? Pritchard nodded vigorously. Yes, sir. Right here in the booth. He was giving orders, adjusting the timing. Jenkins was at the controls, and I was calling cues. We were all together when the scream came. His voice was earnest, but Poirot's eyes lingered on the man's nervous fidgeting, the way his fingers twisted a pencil. And you are certain of the timing? Poirot pressed. 10 seconds. No more. No less? Pritchard hesitated, then nodded. That's what we rehearsed. Gray was particular about it, said it had to be exact. Poirot's moustache twitched. Particular, oui. And did you notice anything unusual before or after the blackout? A sound? A movement? Pritchard frowned, his brow furrowing. It's hard to say, sir. Backstage is always a madhouse during a scene change. Ropes creaking, footsteps, whispers from the cast. I was focused on the cues. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Merci, monsieur. You have been most helpful. As they descended the ladder, Japp muttered, Seems to check out, Poirot. Gray's covered. But Poirot's eyes were distant, his mind turning over the details. Covered, perhaps, but the alibi is only as strong as the men who give it. Pritchard is loyal. Jenkins unknown. We must speak with this technician. Jenkins, a lanky young man with a shock of red hair, was found in the prop room, nervously polishing a brass candelabra. His account matched Pritchard's. Gray had been in the booth, barking orders during the blackout. But Poirot noted a slight hesitation when asked if anyone else had been present. Just us three, Jenkins said, but his eyes flicked to the side, a tell Poirot stored away for later. Back on the stage, Poirot paused by the crimson curtain, his fingers brushing its heavy folds. The spot where Vane had fallen was marked by a chalk outline, the bloodstain already darkening on the boards. Hastings, he said softly, consider the precision of this crime. The dagger, swapped for a real one. The blackout, timed to perfection. The killer moved with confidence, knowing the stage, the darkness, the moment. Gray created that moment. But did he wield the blade? Hastings frowned, his practical mind grappling with the complexity. If not Gray, then who? Clara was on stage, wasn't she? And Wheeler was skulking about somewhere. Poirot's smile was faint. Skulking, oui, but we must not leap to conclusions. The director's vision shaped this crime, but the hand that struck may belong to another. We shall see. As the theatre's gaslights flickered, casting long shadows across the stage, Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities. Gray's temper, his control over the blackout, his strained relationship with Vane, all pointed to a man with reason to act. Yet something in his demeanor, a flicker of genuine shock, gave Poirot pause. The truth, he knew, lay in the details yet to be uncovered, and the little grey cells were already at work, piecing together the puzzle of the crimson curtain. Chapter 4. The leading lady's charm, the gaiety. Theatre, its stage now a silent witness to tragedy, seemed to pulse with secrets as Hercule Poirot continued his meticulous investigation. The backstage corridors, dimly lit by flickering gas lamps, were a maze of shadows and whispers, the air heavy with the scent of sawdust and stale perfume. The crimson curtain, lowered to conceal Edmund Vane's final resting place, hung like a barrier between truth and illusion. Poirot, his small frame moving with purposeful grace, navigated this world of artifice with the precision of a conductor, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Captain Hastings, trailing behind, adjusted his tie, a nervous habit that surfaced in the face of such grim business. "Poirot," he said, his voice low. "This place feels like a stage set for a ghost story. That scream still echoes in my head. Do you think we'll get to the bottom of it soon?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, like a fine performance, reveals itself in its own time. But Hercule Poirot does not wait idly. He seeks." Inspector Japp, his notebook now filled with scribbled observations, joined them near the dressing rooms, where the faint hum of activity from the remaining cast and crew lingered. "We've got the dagger bagged up," Japp said, his tone brisk. "Real blade, no question, honed to a wicked edge. Someone meant business. I'm thinking we need to press Clara Beaumont next. She was on stage, wasn't she? Right in the thick of it." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Oui, Inspector. Mademoiselle Beaumont is a star in her own right, but stars, they can cast shadows as well as light. Let us see what her performance reveals." Clara Beaumont was summoned to her own dressing room, a small but elegant space adorned with a gilded mirror, a velvet chaise, and a vase of wilting roses, gifts, perhaps, from an admirer. She entered with the poise of a queen, her auburn hair catching the lamplight, her silk gown rustling softly. At 30, Clara was a vision of beauty, her hazel eyes luminous with a practiced sorrow that seemed almost too perfect. She sank onto the chaise, her hands folded gracefully, a lace handkerchief clutched as if for comfort. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice soft yet resonant, "this is a dreadful ordeal. Poor Edmund. Such a loss to us all." Her eyes glistened, and a single tear traced a delicate path down her cheek. Poirot, standing before her, his hands clasped behind his back, regarded her with a gaze both gentle and unrelenting. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, your grief does you credit. But let us be precise. You were on stage during the blackout, preparing for your entrance, non?" Clara nodded, her expression one of fragile composure. "Yes, I was in the wings, stage left, adjusting my shawl. The blackout came so suddenly. Complete darkness. I could hear the rustle of the cast moving, the creak of the stage, but nothing else until... That scream." She shivered, her hand rising to her throat, a gesture that seemed rehearsed to Poirot's keen eye. "And in those 10 seconds of darkness," Poirot continued, his tone deceptively mild, "you saw nothing, heard nothing unusual. No footsteps, no brush of fabric near the curtain." Clara shook her head, her eyes wide. "Nothing, Mr. Poirot. It was chaos, as it always is during a scene change. Actors shifting, stagehands moving props. It's a whirlwind. Anyone could have been there. Unseen." Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the way her fingers tightened on the handkerchief, crumpling its delicate lace. Hastings, leaning against the doorframe, whispered to Japp, "She's a cool one, isn't she? All tears and charm, but I'd wager she's hiding something." Japp grunted in agreement, but Poirot's focus remained on Clara, his mind sifting her words for truth. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you and Monsieur Van were close, oui? Colleagues, friends, perhaps more?" The question hung in the air, and Clara's smile faltered, a fleeting crack in her polished facade. "Friends, yes," she replied, her tone careful. "Edmund was a brilliant actor, and we worked well together. Naturally, there were moments of tension. The stage is a passionate place, Mr. Poirot, but I had nothing but respect for him." Her eyes met his, bold yet guarded, and Poirot sensed a depth of feeling she was not yet ready to reveal. He changed tack, his voice soft but probing. The role of the Scarlet Mask. It was a triumph for Monsieur Van. Yet I have heard whispers that you, too, desired it. Is this true? Clara's lips parted, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she recovered. Whispers, Mr. Poirot? The theatre is full of them. Yes, I thought the role suited me, but Edmund was chosen, and I accepted that. I'm a professional. Her words were smooth, but Poirot detected a faint edge, a spark of resentment beneath her composure. Professionals, Poirot mused. They mask their feelings well. But envy, mademoiselle, it is a fire that burns quietly. Did you not feel it, even a little, when Vane took the spotlight? Clara's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing for an instant before softening again. Envy? Perhaps a touch, as any actor might. But to kill for it? You mistake me, Mr. Poirot. Her voice was firm, but her hands betrayed her, twisting the handkerchief into a knot. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, though his mind was far from settled. One final question, mademoiselle. The dagger. Had you handled it during rehearsals? It was a prop, oui, but replaced with a real blade. Would you have noticed such a change? Clara hesitated, her brow furrowing. I don't recall handling it myself. It was kept on the prop table, near the wings. Anyone could have touched it. Her answer was vague, and Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. Anyone, indeed, he murmured. As Clara was dismissed, she rose with a grace that seemed to reclaim the room, her tears dry, her composure restored. Poirot watched her go, his mind turning over her words. "What do you think, Poirot?" Hastings asked, stepping forward. "She's got the charm of a siren, but there's something off about her, don't you think?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Off, mon ami? Perhaps. She plays the role of the grieving star with skill, but the little grey cells detect a performance within a performance. Her tears, they are too perfect, her answers too careful." Japp, flipping through his notebook, added, "She was on stage, right where the murder happened. No alibi worth a damn in that blackout. And that bit about the role. She wanted it, didn't she?" Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing his moustache. "Oui, Inspector. The desire for glory. It is a powerful motive. But we must not rush to judgment. Clara Beaumont is a woman of talent, and talent can conceal as much as it reveals." Poirot led the way to the prop table, a cluttered affair tucked in the wings, where the dagger had been kept before the fatal performance. The table was a jumble of goblets, candlesticks, and rolled scripts, but the space where the dagger had rested was marked by a faint outline in the dust. Poirot examined it closely, his magnifying glass glinting in the lamplight. "Curieux," he murmured. The dagger was here, accessible to all. Yet to replace a prop with a real blade requires knowledge of the play, the props, the moment. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, ventured, "Could Clara have done it?" "She'd know the props, wouldn't she?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "She would, mon ami, as would others. The stage manager, the prop master, even our silent Monsieur Wheeler. But Clara, she was near the curtain, in the darkness, close enough to strike." He straightened, his gaze drifting to the crimson curtain, its folds heavy with secrets. "Inspector," Poirot said, turning to Japp, "I would have your men search Mademoiselle Beaumont's dressing room. Look for anything unusual, a trace of blood, a hidden blade, perhaps a cloth used to wipe the dagger." Japp nodded, signaling to the constable. "Good thinking, Poirot. If she's our killer, she might have left a clue. As the constable hurried off, Poirot paced the wings, his mind a whirl of the possibilities. Clara's beauty, her charm, her carefully crafted sorrow. They were all part of a performance, but was it one of innocence or guilt? The blackout had given her opportunity, the role of the Scarlet Mask a motive. Yet something in her manner, a flicker of genuine fear, gave Poirot pause. The heart of this crime, he said softly, almost to himself, is not in the act alone, but in the passion behind it. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she burns brightly, but does she burn with envy or with fear? The theatre, its silence broken only by the distant creak of a rope, seemed to watch as Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle of the Crimson Curtain. The leading lady had played her part, but the truth, Poirot knew, was yet to take centre stage. Chapter 5. The Shadow in the Wings. The Gaiety. Theatre, its once vibrant air now stifled by the weight of murder, seemed to close in around Hercule Poirot as he delved deeper into the mystery of Edmund Vane's death. The backstage area, a warren of narrow passages and cluttered corners, was lit by the dim glow of gas lamps, casting long shadows that danced like spectres across the walls. The Crimson Curtain, still lowered over the stage, loomed as a silent witness, its heavy folds concealing the spot where Vane had fallen. Poirot, his small frame moving with quiet determination, navigated this shadowed world with the precision of a chess master, his mind attuned to the subtlest of clues. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, followed closely, his brow furrowed with unease. "Poirot," he said, his voice hushed, "there's something about this place that makes my skin crawl. All these nooks and crannies, perfect for someone to slip about unnoticed, don't you think?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the half-light, his moustache twitching faintly. "Précisément, mon ami. The theatre is a labyrinth of opportunity, and in its shadows our killer moved unseen. But Hercule Poirot sees what others do not." Inspector Japp, his face set in a determined scowl, joined them near a stack of wooden flats, his notebook tucked under his arm. "We've searched Miss Beaumont's dressing room," he reported, his tone gruff. "Nothing out of the ordinary. No blood, no hidden blades, just makeup, costumes, and a pile of fan letters. But I'm not convinced she's in the clear. She was right there on stage, Poirot." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Oui, Inspector. But we must not fix our gaze on one player alone. Let us now speak with Monsieur Tom Wheeler, the stagehand. He is a man of few words, and such men often hide much." Tom Wheeler was found in the prop room, a cavernous space filled with the detritus of countless productions, gilded chairs, tarnished swords, and dusty tapestries. He stood polishing a brass lantern, his broad shoulders hunched, his rough hands moving with a mechanical rhythm. At 32, Wheeler was a man worn by life, his grey eyes shadowed, his face etched with lines that spoke of hardship. His threadbare jacket and scuffed boots marked him as a labourer, unnoticed by the glittering crowds who applauded the stars. As Poirot approached, Wheeler's hands stilled, his gaze fixed on the lantern as if it held answers. "Monsieur Wheeler," Poirot began, his voice courteous but firm, "you are the unseen pulse of this theatre. Oui? You move the scenery, adjust the lights, ensure the magic unfolds. Yet on this night, a tragedy occurred under your watch. What can you tell me?" Wheeler's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking briefly to Poirot before returning to the lantern. "Didn't see nothing," he muttered, his voice low and rough as gravel. I was backstage, moving a flat for the next scene. Heard the scream, same as everyone. Poirot tilted his head, his gaze unyielding. Backstage, you say? But where, precisely? The wings are close to the curtain, non? Close enough to hear a rustle, a step, perhaps a gasp. Wheeler's hands resumed their polishing, the cloth moving faster now. I was further back, near the fly ropes, didn't hear nothing till the scream. His words were clipped, his tone defensive, and Poirot noted the way his shoulders tensed, as if bracing for a blow. Hastings, standing by a rack of costumes, whispered to Japp. "He's a shifty sort, isn't he? Looks like he'd rather be anywhere but here." Japp nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Aye, he's hiding something. I'd bet my badge on it." Poirot, overhearing, gave a faint smile, but kept his focus on Wheeler. "Monsieur, you are a man who observes much but speaks little. Yet the theatre is a small world, and secrets travel. Did you know Monsieur Vane beyond your work? Was there, perhaps, a history between you?" Wheeler's hands froze, the lantern glinting under the lamplight. For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant creak of a pulley. "Knew him as the star," Wheeler said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's all." But Poirot's keen senses caught the slight tremor in his tone, the way his eyes darted to the side, as if seeking an escape from the question. "Curieux," Poirot murmured, stepping closer, his small frame radiating authority. "You are not forthcoming, Monsieur Wheeler. Yet I have heard a whisper. A junior stagehand, young Mr. Davies, saw you near the curtain just before the blackout. Is this true?" Wheeler's face hardened, his grey eyes meeting Poirot's for the first time, a flicker of defiance in them. "Davies is a kid, gets things wrong. I was nowhere near the curtain. I was doing my job, like always." Poirot's smile was polite, but piercing. "Your job, oui. And yet, in 10 seconds of darkness, a man was stabbed. You know the stage, its rhythms, its hiding places. Could you not have moved swiftly, unseen?" Wheeler's hands clenched, the cloth crumpling in his fist. "I ain't no killer," he growled. "I keep my head down, do my work. You want to know who did it? Ask them fancy actors, not me." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, though his mind was far from settled. "Merci, Monsieur Wheeler. You may return to your duties, but remain in the theatre." As Wheeler slouched away, his footsteps heavy on the floorboards, Poirot turned to Japp and Hastings, his expression grave. A man of shadows, that one. He knows more than he says, but whether it is guilt or fear, I cannot yet say. Japp scratched his chin, his brow furrowed. "He's a tough nut, Poirot. That business about being near the curtain, if Davies is right, Wheeler's lying." "But why?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Why indeed? Perhaps he saw something he daresn't reveal, or perhaps he played a part in this tragedy. We must speak with young Davies to confirm his tale." They found Alfie Davies, a lanky lad of 17, in the fly gallery, coiling ropes with nervous energy. His freckled face paled as Poirot approached, his hands fumbling with the hemp. "Mr. Poirot, sir," he stammered, "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just told the constable what I saw." Poirot's smile was reassuring, his tone gentle. "No trouble, Monsieur Davies. Only truth. Tell me, what did you see of Monsieur Wheeler before the blackout?" Alfie swallowed, his eyes darting. "To the ropes. I was up here, adjusting the flies. I saw Tom, Mr. Wheeler, down below, near the stage right curtain. He was just standing there, looking at the stage, maybe a minute before the lights went out. I thought it was odd. He's usually running about, not standing still." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And after the blackout? Where was he then?" Alfie shook his head. "Didn't see him after. It was dark, then the scream, and everything went mad." Poirot thanked the boy, his mind turning over this new piece of the puzzle. "Curieux," he said softly, as they descended to the stage. "Wheeler denies being near the curtain, yet Davies places him there. A discrepancy, no? And in a theatre, where every movement is choreographed, such discrepancies are telling." Hastings, his practical mind grappling with the details, ventured, "If Wheeler was near the curtain, he could have slipped in during the blackout, couldn't he?" Grabbed the dagger, struck Vane, then melted back into the wings. Poirot nodded, but his expression was cautious. "Possible, mon ami, but we must not leap. Wheeler's silence suggests a secret. But is it the secret of a killer or a witness? We must learn more of his history with Vane." Japp, flipping open his notebook, added, "I'll have my men dig into Wheeler's past. If he's got a grudge against Vane, we'll find it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, Inspector. And while you search, I shall examine the stage once more. The wings, the curtain, the props. They hold the truth, if we look closely." As they returned to the stage, Poirot paused by the prop table, his magnifying glass glinting as he studied the dust where the dagger had lain. "The dagger was here," he murmured, "accessible to all, yet chosen with care. Wheeler, with his knowledge of the stage, could have made the switch, but so could others." His gaze drifted to the crimson curtain, its folds heavy with mystery. "The shadow in the wings," he said softly. "It moved with purpose. But whose purpose, and why? The theatre, its silence broken only by the faint creak of the flies, seemed to watch as Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, unravelling the threads of the crimson curtain's deadly secret. Chapter 6. The mechanics of murder, the Gaiety Theatre, its once lively corridors now steeped in an oppressive hush, seemed to guard its secrets as fiercely as a vault. The backstage area, with its tangle of ropes, pulleys, and half-forgotten props, was a labyrinth of shadows, illuminated only by the flickering glow of gas lamps. The crimson curtain, still drawn across the stage, hung like a barrier between the world of illusion and the grim reality of Edmund Vane's murder. Hercule Poirot, his small figure a beacon of order amid the chaos, moved with deliberate precision, his sharp green eyes scanning every detail of the stage that had become a crime scene. Captain Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, rubbed his hands against the chill that seemed to seep from the very walls. "I say, Poirot," he murmured, his voice low, "this place feels like a tomb now. That dagger business. Someone planned this down to the second, didn't they?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze fixed on the chalk outline marking Vane's final resting place. "Précisément, mon ami. This was no crime of passion, but one of calculation. The mechanics of the theatre, the darkness, the props, the timing, were turned into instruments of death. But Hercule Poirot will uncover how." Inspector Japp, his face etched with the strain of a long night, approached from the wings, his boots echoing on the worn floorboards. "We've got the coroner's initial report," he said, flipping open his notebook. "Vane was killed with a single stab to the heart, clean and precise. The dagger was no prop, it's a real blade, likely brought in from outside. Whoever did this knew exactly where to strike." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. A single blow, Inspector, delivered in 10 seconds of darkness. This speaks of skill, or at least of intent. Poirot led the way to the stage, where the crimson curtain loomed, its heavy folds absorbing the light. He knelt beside the chalk outline, his magnifying glass glinting as he examined the floorboards. The blood stain, now a dark, congealed pool, was stark against the wood. But Poirot's attention was drawn to a faint smudge nearby, a greasy mark, barely noticeable, that seemed out of place. "Curieux," he murmured, his fingers hovering over the smudge. "This grease, it is not blood, nor dust. It is the kind used on stage machinery, oui?" Hastings peered over his shoulder, his brow furrowed. Grease? Could it be from the ropes or pulleys? The stage hands are always tinkering with that sort of thing. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing. Perhaps, mon ami. But why here, near the body, and not near the machinery? This mark, it is a clue, misplaced or deliberate. He rose, dusting his hands with a handkerchief, his gaze sweeping the stage. "Let us reconstruct the moment of the crime." Japp, ever practical, gestured toward the curtain. The blackout lasted 10 seconds, according to Pritchard. Vane was center stage, waiting for his cue. The killer had to move in, stab him, and get out before the lights came up. "That's tight timing, Poirot." Poirot nodded, pacing the stage with measured steps. 10 seconds, Inspector. Enough for a swift hand, one familiar with the stage's layout. The dagger was on the prop table, stage right, accessible to all. But to strike in darkness, without hesitation. This requires knowledge, non? He paused by the prop table, now cordoned off by a constable, and examined the space where the dagger had rested. The dust bore a faint outline, confirming its place, but Poirot's attention was drawn to the surrounding items. A goblet, a candlestick, a coiled rope, all untouched, orderly. The killer took only the dagger, he mused. No other prop was disturbed. This was no random act. Hastings, his mind turning to the suspects, ventured, "Wheeler's our man for this, isn't he? He's around the props all the time, knows the stage like the back of his hand. And that grease, maybe it's from his tools." Poirot's smile was faint but enigmatic. "A possibility, Hastings, but we must not assume. The grease is a clue, but to whom does it point? Wheeler, yes, but also any who handle the machinery. Or perhaps one who wished to make us think of Wheeler." Japp, scribbling in his notebook, looked up. "I've got my men checking the prop room for any other blades or tools that might match that grease. But what about the blackout itself? Gray planned it, but could someone else have known the exact timing?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind sifting through the details. The blackout was announced at the final rehearsal, oui? The cast, the crew, all would have known. But to use it, to move in darkness with such precision, this suggests intimacy with the production. Poirot turned to the wings, where the heavy ropes and counterweights of the fly system hung, their surfaces slick with grease. He examined a pulley, his fingers carefully avoiding the sticky residue. "This grease," he said softly. "It is common in the theatre, yet its presence near the body is not. Did the killer touch the machinery before striking, or leave this mark to mislead?" He straightened, his gaze returning to the curtain. "The mechanics of this murder are clear. The blackout provided cover. The dagger was the weapon, the stage the arena. But the why, the who, these are the questions." To test his theory, Poirot requested a reenactment of the blackout. Pritchard, the stage manager, was summoned, his face pale and drawn. "Mr. Poirot," he said, wringing his hands, "I don't like going over it again, but I'll do what you ask." With Japp's approval, the lights were dimmed, plunging the stage into darkness. Poirot stood centre stage, where Vane had been, while Hastings and Japp positioned themselves in the wings. 10 seconds, Poirot called, his voice steady. "Mark the time." The darkness was absolute, the silence broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards as someone shifted. Poirot counted silently, his senses alert. At 10 seconds, the lights flared, revealing the stage once more. Poirot's eyes scanned the scene, noting the positions of his companions. "It is possible," he said, "to move from the wings to the centre and back in 10 seconds, but only with purpose and familiarity. The killer knew exactly where to go." Hastings, catching his breath, said, "Blimey, Poirot, it's like trying to find your way in a fog. Whoever did this must have rehearsed it." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Rehearsed, oui, or known the stage as their own. Let us consider the suspects. Monsieur Gray, who created the blackout. Mademoiselle Beaumont, who stood in the wings, close enough to strike. Monsieur Wheeler, whose knowledge of the stage is unmatched. Each had opportunity. But the grease, this is the key." Japp, wiping his brow, added, "I'll have Wheeler's tools checked for that grease. If it matches, we've got him." Poirot's smile was cautious. "A match, Inspector, would be convenient, but convenience is not truth. We must also consider how the dagger was brought into the theatre. A real blade, not a prop. This suggests premeditation, perhaps from outside." Poirot returned to the smudge, kneeling once more to examine it. He produced a small vial and carefully scraped a sample of the grease, sealing it for analysis. "This," he said, holding up the vial, "may tell us more than our suspects dare. If it matches the machinery, it points to the stagehands. If not, we have another mystery." As they left the stage, the crimson curtain seemed to watch, its folds heavy with unspoken truths. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, each clue a thread in the tapestry of the crime. "The mechanics of murder," he murmured to Hastings, "are simple. A blade, a moment, a motive. But the heart of this crime lies in the shadows, and Hercule Poirot will bring it to light." The theatre, its silence broken only by the distant hum of the city, waited as Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle of the crimson curtain. Chapter 7. Whispers of Envy. The Gaiety Theatre, its once luminous stage now a sombre arena of suspicion, seemed to hold its secrets tightly as Hercule Poirot pursued the truth behind Edmund Vane's murder. The backstage passages, lined with dusty props and coiled ropes, were cloaked in a hush, broken only by the occasional murmur of the remaining crew, their voices low, as if fearful of disturbing the ghosts of the tragedy. The crimson curtain, still drawn across the stage, loomed like a silent judge, its rich folds a reminder of the blood spilled beneath it. Poirot, his small figure moving with the precision of a metronome, navigated this world of shadows with an air of quiet authority, his sharp green eyes missing nothing. Captain Hastings, trailing behind, adjusted his hat, his face etched with the strain of the unfolding mystery. "Poirot," he said, his voice a hushed whisper, "this case is a tangle. Everyone seems to have had a reason to dislike Vane. But who hated him enough to kill?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint sign of his thoughts stirring. "Hatred, mon ami, is a fire that burns brightly. but envy. It is a poison that works in silence. We must listen to the whispers of the theatre, for they will lead us to the truth. Inspector Japp, his notebook now a patchwork of scrawled notes, joined them near a cluttered bulletin board plastered with rehearsal schedules and cast notices. "I've got my men, interviewing the minor players," he said, his tone brisk but weary. "Seems Vane wasn't exactly beloved. A few grudges here and there, but nothing solid yet. What's your next move, Poirot?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the bulletin board, where a faded photograph of Vane in a previous role caught his eye. "We must explore the undercurrents, Inspector. The cast and crew, they see much, and their whispers may reveal the heart of this crime." Poirot requested a meeting with the supporting actors and crew, gathering them in the rehearsal room, a stark space with a scarred wooden floor and a single mirror reflecting their anxious faces. The group was a motley assembly, a young ingenue, a grizzled character actor, a wardrobe mistress, and a props assistant, each eyeing the others with a mix of suspicion and unease. Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding attention, his voice clear and precise. "Mes amis," he began, "a tragedy has struck this theatre, and you, who know its pulse, may hold the key to its truth. Tell me of Monsieur Vane. What was he to you?" The ingenue, a nervous girl named Lily Harper, spoke first, her voice trembling. "Mr. Vane was dazzling, sir. But he could be sharp, you know. He didn't mean it. But he'd snap at us sometimes, especially if we missed a cue." Her eyes darted to the others, as if seeking approval. Poirot nodded encouragingly. "And did you see such sharpness directed at anyone in particular?" Lily hesitated, then whispered. "Miss Beaumont, Clara. She and Mr. Vane had words a few times. She wanted the lead, you see. The Scarlet Mask was her dream role." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind filing away this revelation. "Mademoiselle Harper, you say Mademoiselle Beaumont coveted the role. Was this widely known?" Lily nodded, her cheeks flushing. "Oh, yes, sir. She didn't hide it. She'd talk about how she'd have played it differently, how she'd have made it her own." The wardrobe mistress, a stout woman named Mrs. Gibbs, chimed in, her voice gruff. "Clara was proper put out when Mr. Vane got the part. Said it was unfair, him being the star again." Hastings, standing by the door, whispered to Japp, "There's your motive, clear as day. Clara wanted that role badly." Japp nodded, scribbling furiously, but Poirot's expression remained impassive, his mind sifting through the implications. He turned to the character actor, a wiry man named Harold Kent, whose lined face spoke of years on the boards. "Monsieur Kent, you worked closely with Vane. Did you observe tension with others?" Kent shrugged, his voice dry. "Edmund was a peacock, strutting about, stealing the light. He clashed with Mr. Gray most of all. They'd shout over blocking, lines, everything. Gray wanted control, but Edmund wouldn't bend. I heard them at it just last week. Gray said he'd ruin the play if he didn't stop meddling." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And did Monsieur Gray seem vengeful?" Kent hesitated, then shook his head. "Not vengeful, just frustrated. But he was particular about that blackout, kept drilling us on the timing." Poirot's gaze sharpened, the mention of the blackout stirring his thoughts. "The blackout? Oui. Who else spoke of it?" The props assistant, a quiet man named Mr. Baxter, raised a hand. "Mr. Gray told us all at the final rehearsal, said it was to build suspense. Everyone knew, cast, crew, even the stagehands." Poirot nodded, his mind turning to Tom Wheeler. And Monsieur Wheeler? Did he speak of Vane or show any ill will? The group exchanged glances, a ripple of unease passing through them. Mrs. Gibbs spoke up, her voice low. "Wheeler's a quiet one, keeps to himself. But I heard tell. Mind, it's just gossip, that he and Vane had a falling out years back. Something about a job Wheeler lost because of Vane." Poirot's eyes gleamed, this new thread sparking his interest. "A falling out, you say? Who else knows of this?" Baxter nodded. "It's an old story, sir. Wheeler worked on a show Vane starred in, up north. Vane got him sacked, said he was careless. Wheeler never forgot it." Poirot thanked the group, dismissing them with a courteous nod, his mind already racing. As they filed out, he turned to Japp and Hastings, his expression grave. "Envie, mon ami. It runs like a current through this theatre. Mademoiselle Beaumont denied her starring role. Monsieur Gray, his vision challenged by Vane's ego. And Monsieur Wheeler, nursing a grudge from years past. Each has a reason to resent our victim." Japp, flipping through his notebook, grunted. "That's a lot of bad blood, Poirot. Clara's looking good for it. She was right there, and she wanted that part. But Wheeler's grudge sounds personal, and Gray's blackout gave the killer their chance." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Oui, Inspector, but we must not rush. Envy is a motive, but the act, the dagger, the darkness, requires opportunity and nerve. Let us examine the rehearsal schedule." Pritchard, the stage manager, was summoned again, his bald head glistening with nervous sweat as he produced a worn ledger. Poirot studied it, his finger tracing the entries for the final rehearsal. "The blackout," he said. "It was added only days ago, oui?" Pritchard nodded. "Yes, sir. Mr. Gray insisted on it. Said it would make the opening unforgettable. We practiced it twice, so everyone knew the timing." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Everyone, you say? And who was near the stage during these rehearsals?" Pritchard hesitated, his fingers fidgeting. "The cast, mostly. Clara, Edmund, the others. Wheeler was handling props, as usual. I didn't see him near the curtain, but he's always about." Poirot nodded, his mind filing away this detail. "And the dagger? Was it checked before the performance?" Pritchard's face paled. "It should have been, sir. By the props master. But with the rush, I can't swear it was." Poirot dismissed Pritchard, his gaze drifting to the crimson curtain, visible through the rehearsal room's open door. "The whispers of envy," he murmured. "They point to many. But the truth lies in the act itself. The blackout, the dagger, the grease, these are the mechanics we must unravel." Hastings, ever eager, ventured. "What about Wheeler's grudge? If Vane got him sacked, that's a score to settle." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, mon ami, but a grudge alone does not make a murderer. We must learn more of this history, and whether it burned brightly enough to kill." Japp, his patience wearing thin, said, "I'll have my men dig deeper into Wheeler's past. If he's got a record, or if Vane crossed him badly, we'll know it." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Do so, Inspector, and while you search, I shall return to the stage. The whispers have given us motives, but the stage will give us facts." As they moved toward the stage, the theatre's silence seemed to deepen, the crimson curtain a mute witness to the drama unfolding. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, each whisper of envy a thread in the tapestry of the crime. "The heart of this murder," he said softly, "is not in the act alone, but in the passions that drove it. Envy, resentment, betrayal. These are the players, and Hercule Poirot will unmask them." Chapter 8. The alibi unravels. The Gaiety Theatre, its once vibrant spirit now cloaked in a pall of suspicion, seemed to tighten its grip on its secrets as Hercule Poirot pressed deeper into the mystery of Edmund Vane's murder. The backstage passages, with their creaking floorboards and shadowed corners, were lit only by the dim flicker of gas lamps, casting a ghostly glow over the coils of rope and discarded props. The crimson curtain, still lowered over the stage, stood as a sombre barrier, its rich folds hiding the truth of the fatal moment. Poirot, his small frame moving with the precision of a watchmaker, navigated this world of illusion with an unyielding focus, his sharp green eyes searching for the crack in the facade of the killer's design. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, followed closely, his face a study in concentration. "Poirot," he said, his voice hushed. "We've got motives aplenty. Clara's ambition, Gray's frustration, Wheeler's grudge. But how do we pin it down? That blackout was so brief. How could anyone be sure of their mark?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his inner workings. "Mon ami, the brevity of the blackout is its genius. It was a moment crafted for murder, and the one who used it knew its every beat. Hercule Poirot will find the rhythm of this crime." Inspector Japp, his notebook now dog-eared from constant use, joined them near the stage manager's desk, where a pile of crumpled scripts lay scattered. "I've had my men check. Wheeler's tools," he said, his tone a mix of frustration and determination. "The grease on the stage matches what he uses on the pulleys, but it's common stuff. Half the crew could have left that smudge. We need something solid, Poirot." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Solid, oui, Inspector. And to find it we must test the alibis, for they are the scaffolding of this crime. Let us begin with Monsieur Gray, whose blackout set the stage for murder." Lionel Gray was summoned to the stage, where the crimson curtain loomed behind him like a silent accuser. The director entered with his usual theatrical flair, his silver-streaked hair swept back, his velvet jacket slightly rumpled from the night's ordeal. His dark eyes flashed with a mix of defiance and unease as he faced Poirot, who stood center stage, his small figure radiating authority. "Mr. Poirot," Gray began, his voice resonant but strained, "I've told you all I know. This harping on the blackout, it's unfair. It was an artistic choice, not a blueprint for murder." Poirot's gaze was unyielding, his tone polite, but piercing. "Monsieur Gray, art and crime are not so far apart in this case. You added the blackout to the script, a mere 10 seconds of darkness, yet it was enough for a killer to strike. Tell me, why was this change so vital?" Gray's hands gestured expansively, as if directing a scene. "It was for drama, Mr. Poirot, to plunge the audience into suspense, to make Edmund's entrance a revelation. I discussed it at the final rehearsal. Everyone knew." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "Everyone, oui. But you were particular about the timing, non? 10 seconds, no more, no less. Why such precision?" Gray faltered, his fingers twitching at his cravat. It had to be exact to keep the rhythm of the scene. Too long, and the audience would grow restless. Too short, and the effect would be lost." Poirot's smile was faint, but probing. "And in the lighting booth, you ensured this precision, with Monsieur Pritchard and Jenkins. Yet the booth is but a short distance from the stage. Could a man, swift and determined, have descended in those 10 seconds? Gray's face flushed, his voice rising. "Are you accusing me, sir? I was in the booth, giving orders. Pritchard and Jenkins will vouch for me." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming but firm. I accuse no one, monsieur. I seek only the truth. But let us test this alibi. Inspector, may we summon Monsieur Jenkins? Jenkins, the lanky lighting technician, with a shock of red hair, was brought to the stage, his nervous energy palpable. He stood twisting his cap in his hands, his eyes darting between Poirot and Gray. Monsieur Jenkins, Poirot began, his tone encouraging, you were in the lighting booth during the blackout, ouais? Tell me, was Monsieur Gray at your side the entire time? Jenkins nodded, his voice hesitant. Yes, sir. He was there, telling me to watch the clock, make sure the blackout was spot on. He didn't leave, not that I saw. Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the slight pause in Jenkins' words. Not that you saw, monsieur. But in the booth, with its levers and switches, your attention was on the controls, no? Could someone have slipped away for a moment, unnoticed? Jenkins's face paled, his hands tightening on his cap. I suppose it's possible, sir. I was focused on the board. But it was only 10 seconds. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. 10 seconds, oui. A lifetime in a theatre. As Jenkins was dismissed, Poirot turned to Gray, his voice soft but relentless. Monsieur Gray, your alibi rests on men distracted by their tasks. The booth is close to the stage. Steps away, through a door and down a ladder. A man who knows his theatre could move quickly, non? Gray's eyes widened, his voice sharp. This is absurd. I created the blackout for art, not murder. You're twisting my work against me. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. I twist nothing, monsieur. I merely examine the threads of this tapestry. Next, Poirot requested Clara Beaumont's presence. The leading lady entered with her customary grace, her auburn hair catching the stage lights, her silk gown whispering as she moved. Her hazel eyes, still glistening with practiced sorrow, met Poirot's with a boldness that belied her delicate appearance. She stood near the curtain, her posture that of a star awaiting her cue. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice soft but clear, I hope you're closer to finding poor Edmund's killer. This tragedy haunts us all. Poirot's gaze was gentle but unyielding. Mademoiselle Beaumont, your concern is noted. But let us revisit the moment of the blackout. You were in the wings, stage left, preparing for your entrance, ouais? Clara nodded, her hands clasped demurely. Yes, I was adjusting my shawl, waiting for the lights to return. It was so dark, I could barely see. Poirot tilted his head, his tone probing. And yet you were but a few steps from Monsieur Van. In 10 seconds, could you not have moved to the centre, struck, and returned to your mark? Clara's lips parted, a flicker of alarm crossing her face before she recovered. Mr. Poirot, you shock me. I was in my place, as the stage manager will confirm. I stepped out after the scream, when the lights came up. Poirot's smile was polite, but piercing. The stage manager, oui. But in the chaos of the blackout, with actors and crew moving, who can be certain of your exact position? You knew the stage, the timing, the dagger's place. Clara's eyes narrowed, her voice firm. I am an actress, not a murderer. I had no reason to harm Edmund. Poirot nodded, as if conceding, but his mind was far from settled. No reason, mademoiselle. Yet whispers speak of your desire for the Scarlet Mask's role, a role given to Vane. Envy is a powerful force, no? Clara's composure wavered, her hands tightening. Envy? Perhaps I felt a pang, as any actor might, but to kill for it. You mistake my character, Mr. Poirot. Her words were steady, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her fingers, the way her eyes avoided his. As Clara was dismissed, Poirot turned to Japp and Hastings, his expression grave. The alibis, they begin to fray. Gray's is not as solid as he claims, and Mademoiselle Beaumont's relies on a moment of darkness no one can fully confirm. Wheeler's denial of being near the curtain is contradicted by young Davies. We are close, mesdames, to unravelling this knot. Hastings, his brow furrowed, ventured, Clara's got the best opportunity, hasn't she? Right there in the wings, and she wanted that role. Japp nodded, adding, and Gray's blackout, too convenient, if you ask me. But Wheeler's lie about the curtain bothers me most. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Each thread pulls us closer, but we must find the one that ties them all, the motive that turned envy or anger into murder. The theatre, its silence broken only by the faint creak of the stage, seemed to watch as Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, unravelling the alibis that shielded the truth behind the crimson curtain. Chapter 9. The grease stain, the gaiety. Theatre, its once lively corridors now steeped in a heavy stillness, seemed to pulse with the weight of its secrets as Hercule Poirot continued his relentless pursuit of Edmund Vane's killer. The backstage passages, lined with worn ropes and shadowed props, were bathed in the dim glow of gas lamps, their flickering light casting eerie shapes across the walls. The crimson curtain, still drawn across the stage, hung like a silent guardian of the truth, its folds concealing the spot where Vane's life had been extinguished. Poirot, his small frame moving with meticulous grace, navigated this world of illusion with the focus of a surgeon, his sharp green eyes fixed on the smallest details that might betray the murderer. Captain Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, shifted uneasily, his practical mind wrestling with the complexity of the case. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "we've got alibis cracking left and right, but that grease smudge you found, it's nagging at me. Could it really point to Wheeler? Or is it a red herring?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze lingering on the stage beyond the wings. "Mon ami, the grease is a whisper from the crime itself. It is out of place, deliberate or accidental, and it will lead us to the truth. Hercule Poirot does not ignore such whispers." Inspector Japp, his face etched with the strain of a long investigation, joined them near the prop table, his notebook tucked under his arm. "My men have analysed that grease sample you took, Poirot," he said, his tone brisk but tinged with frustration. "It matches the kind used on the fly system, and pulleys. Standard stuff. Like Wheeler's got on his tools, but it's too common to pin on him alone. Half the crew could have left it." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Oui, Inspector, but its presence near the body, where no machinery stands, is what intrigues me. Let us return to the stage and examine this clue in its context." The trio moved to the stage, where the chalk outline of Vane's body lay stark against the darkened floorboards. The bloodstain, now a grim shadow, was dwarfed by the towering crimson curtain, its heavy folds absorbing the light. Poirot knelt beside the grease smudge, his magnifying glass glinting as he studied it anew. The mark was faint, a crescent-shaped smear no larger than a shilling, but its position, mere inches from the blood, spoke of significance. "Curieux," he murmured, his fingers hovering over the smudge. "This grease, it is not splattered, not accidental. It was left by a hand, perhaps, or a tool, in the act of murder." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. But why grease at all? If Wheeler's hands were dirty, wouldn't he have wiped them before grabbing the dagger? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing. Précisément, Hastings. The grease suggests contact with the machinery, but not necessarily by the killer. It could be a trace left to mislead, or a mistake by one who moved too quickly in the dark. He rose, dusting his hands with a pristine handkerchief, his gaze sweeping the stage. We must reconstruct the killer's movements, step by step. Poirot paced the stage, his steps measured, as if retracing the fatal moment. Vane stood here, he said, positioning himself at the chalk outline. The blackout begins. 10 seconds of darkness. The killer moves from the wings, stage right, where the dagger lay on the prop table. He gestured towards the table, a cluttered affair just beyond the curtain's edge. They take the dagger, cross to Vane, strike and retreat. But in those 10 seconds, they leave this grease here, near the body. Why? Japp, scratching his chin, ventured, maybe they brushed against a pulley on their way to the stage. The fly system's just there, in the wings. Poirot shook his head, his expression grave. No, Inspector. The pulleys are too far from this spot. The grease was carried here, on a hand, a cloth, or perhaps the dagger itself. He paused, his mind turning to the suspects. Monsieur Wheeler, he works with grease daily. But Mademoiselle Beaumont, she was in the wings, close to the machinery. And Monsieur Gray, he knew the stage's workings as well as any. To test his theory, Poirot requested Wheeler's tools, which a constable brought from the prop room. The toolbox, a battered affair, contained a can of grease identical to that used on the fly system. Poirot opened it, sniffing the pungent odor, his eyes narrowing. This matches the smudge, oui. But as you say, Inspector, it is common. Yet Wheeler's boots, they are clean, non. No grease on them, despite his work. Japp nodded, flipping through his notes. We checked. His hands were grimy, but his boots were spotless. Odd if he was near the body. Poirot's gaze drifted to the wings, where the fly system's ropes hung, their surfaces slick with grease. He approached, examining the pulleys with care, his fingers avoiding the sticky residue. If the killer touched these, he said softly, they would carry grease on their hands. But to leave a smudge so precise, so close to the body, it suggests intent or carelessness in haste. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, consider. A killer who knows the stage could move in darkness, but to leave this mark, they must have touched something greased just before or after the strike. Hastings, his brow furrowed, ventured, could Clara have done it? She was in the wings, wasn't she? Maybe she steadied herself on a pulley while waiting for her cue. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Possible, Hastings, but Mademoiselle Beaumont is meticulous. Would she touch machinery in her silk gown? And Monsieur Gray, in the lighting booth, could he have descended, touched a rope, and returned in 10 seconds? Japp grunted, his patience wearing thin. It's a stretch, Poirot, but I'll have my men check the booth for grease traces. If Gray's hands are dirty, we'll know. Poirot nodded, his mind sifting through the possibilities. And we must consider another possibility. The grease was left to mislead. A clever killer might smear it to point to Wheeler, knowing his tools would be suspect. He returned to the smudge, kneeling once more, his magnifying glass catching the light. This mark, he said, it is not random. It is a signature, intentional or not, and it will betray the hand that made it. To further his inquiry, Poirot requested a closer look at the prop table, where the dagger had rested before the murder. The table, tucked in the stage right wings, was a jumble of goblets, scripts, and a coiled rope, but the space where the dagger had lain was marked by a faint outline in the dust. Poirot examined it, his fingers tracing the air above the surface. "The dagger was here," he murmured, "taken in the dark, used and dropped beside Vane. But the grease, it is not here, only by the body. This suggests the killer did not touch the machinery until after taking the dagger." Japp, his notebook open, added, "We've searched the prop room and the wings. No other blades, no cloths with grease or blood. Whoever brought that dagger in planned it well." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, Inspector. A real blade brought into the theatre, swapped for the prop. This speaks of premeditation, of someone who knew the play's rhythm and the stage's shadows." As they moved to the wings, Poirot paused by the fly system, his gaze lingering on the ropes. He beckoned a stagehand, young Alfie Davies, who approached nervously, his freckled face pale. "Monsieur Davies," Poirot said, his tone gentle. "You saw Monsieur Wheeler near the curtain before the blackout. Did you see him touch the ropes or pulleys?" Alfie shook his head, his voice trembling. "No, sir. He was just standing there, looking at the stage. I didn't see him touch nothing." Poirot thanked the boy, his mind turning over this detail. Wheeler was near, yet did not touch the machinery. Clara was in the wings, Grey in the booth. The grease, it is a puzzle within a puzzle. He turned to Japp, his expression grave. "Inspector, I would have your men search the dressing rooms again, but not for blades, for anything greased, a cloth, a glove, even a costume. The killer left this mark, and they may have carried it away." As the constable hurried off, Poirot stood by the crimson curtain, his fingers brushing its heavy folds. "The grease stain," he said softly. "It is a small thing, yet it speaks loudly. It tells us the killer was here, in this moment, and their hand betrayed them. Hercule Poirot will follow this whisper to its source." The theatre, its silence broken only by the faint creak of the flies, seemed to watch as Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle of the crimson curtain. Chapter 10. The motive emerges. The gaiety. Theatre, its once luminous halls now shrouded in the gloom of suspicion, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot drew closer to the heart of Edmund Vane's murder. The backstage passages, with their creaking boards and shadowed corners, were bathed in the flickering light of gas lamps, casting an eerie pall over the ropes and props that littered the wings. The crimson curtain, still lowered across the stage, stood as a mute sentinel, its heavy folds guarding the truth of the fatal moment. Poirot, his small frame radiating a quiet intensity, moved through this world of artifice with the precision of a maestro, his sharp green eyes seeking the final pieces of the puzzle. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, followed closely, his face etched with anticipation. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "we're getting somewhere, aren't we? That grease stain, the alibis falling apart, it's all pointing to someone. But who?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze fixed on the distant curtain. "Mon ami, we are close to the truth, but it is like a spotlight. It illuminates one player at a time. The motive, it is the key, and today Hercule Poirot will shine that light." Inspector Japp, his notebook now a tangle of crossed-out theories and fresh scribbles, joined them near the stage manager's desk, his expression a mix of determination and fatigue. "I've got something, Poirot," he said, his voice brisk. "My men found a handkerchief in Clara Beaumont's dressing room, tucked behind her mirror. It's got a faint smear of grease. Same kind as the one on the stage. Could be nothing, but it's suspicious." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind seizing on this new clue. "A handkerchief, Inspector. Most interesting. Let us gather our players and see what truths they reveal." The suspects, Lionel Gray, Clara Beaumont, and Tom Wheeler, were assembled in the auditorium, its plush seats empty save for the trio, who sat in a tense semicircle under the dim house lights. The stage loomed behind them, the crimson curtain a brooding backdrop to their unease. Poirot stood before them, his small figure commanding the space, his voice clear and resonant. "Mes amis," he began, his tone grave but measured, "a crime has been committed in this theatre, a crime of precision and passion. Edmund Vane, a star, was struck down in 10 seconds of darkness, and one of you holds the secret of his death. Hercule Poirot will now reveal it." Lionel Gray, his silver-streaked hair dishevelled, leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "This is preposterous, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice sharp with indignation. "I've told you, I was in the lighting booth, directing the scene. My alibi is solid." Clara Beaumont, her auburn hair catching the light, sat with poised elegance, her hazel eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Mr. Poirot, surely you don't suspect me. I was Edmund's friend, his colleague." Tom Wheeler, slouched in his chair, his rough hands clasped tightly, said nothing, his grey eyes fixed on the floor. Poirot raised a hand, silencing their protests. "Let us begin with the mechanics of this crime. A dagger, real and sharp, was placed on the prop table. A blackout, 10 seconds long, was added to the script by Monsieur Gray. In that darkness, the killer struck, leaving a grease stain near the body, a clue that points to the stage's machinery, yet is out of place." He paused, his gaze sweeping the trio. "But it is not the mechanics alone that reveal the killer. It is the motive, the fire in the heart that drove the hand." He turned to Gray, his eyes piercing. "Monsieur Gray, you created the blackout, a perfect moment for murder. Your clashes with Vane were known, his defiance of your vision, his changes to your script. Did this not kindle a rage within you?" Gray's face flushed, his voice rising. "Rage? Yes, I was frustrated. Edmund was a genius, but he meddled, always meddling. But I didn't kill him. I was in the booth with Pritchard and Jenkins." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Oui, but the booth is close to the stage. A swift man, knowing the path, could descend and return. Your alibi is not ironclad, monsieur." Poirot turned to Wheeler, his tone softening but no less probing. "Monsieur Wheeler, you are a man of shadows, yet young Davies saw you near the curtain before the blackout. You bear a grudge against Vane from a past wrong, a job lost, a humiliation. Did this fester into murder?" Wheeler's jaw tightened, his voice low and rough. "I didn't like Vane, that's true. He got me sacked years ago, called me careless. But I didn't kill him. I was moving a flat, nowhere near the curtain when it happened." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yet Davies contradicts you, monsieur. And the grease, it matches your tools. A coincidence, perhaps." Finally, Poirot faced Clara, his gaze gentle but unrelenting. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, you were in the wings, steps from Vane, when the blackout fell. You coveted his role, the Scarlet Mask, a role you believed was yours by right. Envy, it is a poison, no?" Clara's composure wavered, her hands twisting her lace handkerchief. Envy? I won't deny I wanted the role. But to kill for it? You wrong me, Mr. Poirot. Poirot produced the handkerchief from her dressing room, its faint grease smear glinting in the light. This, mademoiselle, was found behind your mirror. Grease, like that near the body. How do you explain it? Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she recovered. I don't know. I handle props sometimes, adjust scenery. It must have come from that. Her voice was steady, but her fingers betrayed her, crumpling the handkerchief she held. Poirot's smile was faint, but piercing. Props, oui. But the grease near the body was not from scenery. It was from a hand, a cloth, perhaps a moment of carelessness in the dark. He stepped back, addressing all three. The motive emerges, mes amis. This was a crime of envy, not rage. Monsieur Vane was a star, but his light dimmed another's. Monsieur Gray, your vision was challenged, but your passion was for art, not blood. Monsieur Wheeler, your grudge was old, but you are a man of silence, not violence. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you stood closest to the flame of envy. You knew the stage, the blackout, the dagger's place. You were in the wings, close enough to strike. Clara's face paled, her voice sharp. This is outrageous. I was in my place, as the stage manager will confirm. Poirot shook his head, his tone calm, but relentless. The stage manager saw you after the scream, mademoiselle, not during the blackout. 10 seconds is enough for a swift hand, one trained to move in darkness. And this handkerchief, he held it aloft, it betrays you. You touched the machinery, perhaps to steady yourself, leaving grease on your hands and then on the stage. Gray and Wheeler exchanged glances, their tension easing as Poirot's focus sharpened on Clara. Hastings, leaning forward, whispered to Japp, "He's got her, hasn't he? That handkerchief's the clincher." Japp nodded, his eyes fixed on Clara. Poirot continued, his voice rising with conviction. "You wanted the scarlet mask, mademoiselle. Vane's triumph was your loss, and in that moment of darkness you seized your chance. The grease was your error, a trace you could not erase." Clara's composure cracked, her eyes blazing. "You have no proof, Mr. Poirot. A handkerchief, it means nothing." But her voice trembled, and Poirot's gaze held her fast. "It means everything, mademoiselle. The little grey cells, they see the pattern, the envy, the opportunity, the mistake. You struck Vane, not to kill, perhaps, but to dim his light, and in doing so, you left your mark." The auditorium fell silent, the crimson curtain a silent witness to the drama unfolding. Poirot's words hung in the air, the motive laid bare, as the truth behind the crimson curtain began to take shape. Chapter 11. The Confession. The Gaiety Theatre, its once glorious auditorium, now a sombre arena of truth, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled suspects, the weight of his accusations settling like dust on the empty seats. The crimson curtain, still drawn across the stage, loomed behind them, its rich folds a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded beneath it. The dim house lights cast long shadows, and the air was thick with tension, as if the theatre itself awaited the final act of this grim drama. Poirot, his small figure radiating an almost palpable authority, surveyed the trio, Lionel Gray, Clara Beaumont, and Tom Wheeler, with eyes that gleamed like polished jade, missing nothing. Captain Hastings, seated in the front row, leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly, his honest face alight with anticipation. "Poirot," he whispered to Inspector Japp, who sat beside him. "He's got her cornered, hasn't he? That handkerchief. It's the nail in the coffin." Japp, his notebook open but untouched, nodded grimly. "Looks like it, Hastings. But Clara's a cool one. Let's see if she cracks." Poirot, overhearing their hushed exchange, allowed a faint twitch of his moustache, his focus unwavering as he prepared to draw the curtain on the mystery. Clara Beaumont sat rigid, her auburn hair catching the faint glow of the lights, her hazel eyes wide with a mix of defiance and fear. Her silk gown, once a symbol of her elegance, seemed to cling to her like a shroud, and the lace handkerchief in her hands was now a crumpled relic of her composure. Lionel Grey, his silver-streaked hair dishevelled, gripped the arms of his chair, his dark eyes darting between Poirot and Clara, as if sensing the tide turning. Tom Wheeler, slouched and silent, stared at the floor, his rough hands clenched, his grey eyes unreadable. The auditorium, vast and empty, amplified the weight of the moment, each breath a note in the symphony of truth Poirot was conducting. "Mademoiselle Beaumont," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the silence like a blade. "We have reached the heart of this crime. Edmund Vane, a star whose light burned brightly, was struck down in 10 seconds of darkness. A darkness crafted by Monsieur Grey, exploited by a hand driven by envy. You, mademoiselle, stood in the wings, steps from Vane, with the dagger within reach. You coveted his role, the scarlet mask, a triumph you believed was yours by right. And this," he held aloft the grease-stained handkerchief, its faint smear glinting in the light. "This betrays you." Clara's lips parted, a sharp intake of breath betraying her. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling but striving for control. "You weave a fine story, but it is just that, a story. A handkerchief with grease? It proves nothing. I told you, I handle props, scenery. This is a theatre, not a courtroom." Her words were bold, but her hands betrayed her, twisting the lace into knots, and her eyes flickered with a desperation Poirot noted with keen interest. Poirot stepped closer, his small frame seeming to grow in stature. "A story, mademoiselle? No, it is the truth, pieced together by the little grey cells. Let us reconstruct the moment. The blackout falls, 10 seconds of darkness. You in the wings. Stage left, know the stage as your own. You move swiftly, taking the dagger, already replaced with a real blade, perhaps by your own hand. You cross to Vane, strike and retreat, leaving a smudge of grease from the machinery you touched to steady yourself in the dark. The handkerchief, hidden behind your mirror, confirms it." Clara's face paled, her composure fracturing like glass. "This is absurd," she cried, her voice rising, a note of panic creeping in. "I was in my place, waiting for my cue. The stage manager saw me after the scream." Poirot shook his head, his tone calm but relentless. "After, mademoiselle, not during. 10 seconds is enough for a trained actress, one who knows every inch of the stage. You moved with the grace of your craft, but the grease was your error, a mark you could not erase." Grey, unable to contain himself, leaned forward, his voice sharp. "See here, Poirot. Are you saying Clara did this? I was in the booth, I swear it. The blackout was my idea, but I didn't know it would be used for murder." Wheeler, silent until now, shifted in his seat, his grey eyes lifting briefly to meet Poirot's. "I didn't do it," he muttered, his voice low but firm. "I wasn't near the curtain, no matter what Davies says." Poirot's gaze lingered on Wheeler, but his focus returned to Clara, the weight of his scrutiny pinning her in place. "Mademoiselle," he continued, his voice softening, almost coaxing, "envy is a fire that consumes. Vane's triumph was your defeat, his light your shadow. You did not plan to kill, perhaps, only to frighten, to make him falter, to dim his star. But in that moment, your hand struck true." He paused, holding up the handkerchief once more. "This, found in your dressing room, bears the grease of the fly system, the same as the smudge by Vane's body. You touched the machinery, mademoiselle, and left your mark on the stage, and in your haste." Clara's eyes blazed, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to kill him." The words burst from her, a confession torn from the depths of her fear. The auditorium seemed to freeze, the air heavy with the weight of her admission. Grey gasped, Wheeler's head snapped up, and Hastings and Japp exchanged a glance of triumph. Clara's hands flew to her face, her body trembling as the truth spilled forth. "It was an accident, I swear. I only wanted to scare him, to make him stumble in his precious role. He mocked me, Mr. Poirot, said I'd never outshine him, that the scarlet mask was his alone." Poirot's expression was stern, his eyes unyielding. "An accident, mademoiselle? No. You brought a real dagger to the stage, replaced the prop, and struck in the darkness. Murder is not an accident, even if born of envy." Clara sobbed, her composure shattered, her silk gown crumpling as she sank back in her chair. I took the dagger from a shop in Covent Garden weeks ago. I thought if I could make him falter, miss his cue, the role would be mine. But in the dark, I misjudged. I didn't mean for him to die." Poirot nodded, his voice softening but firm. "The heart, mademoiselle, it betrays us. Your envy turned to rage, and your hand followed. The grease, it came from the pulley you gripped to steady yourself, a moment of carelessness that sealed your guilt." He turned to Japp, his tone resolute. "Inspector, you have your killer. Mademoiselle Beaumont acted alone, driven by the poison of envy." Japp rose, signalling to a constable waiting in the wings. "Clara Beaumont, you're under arrest for the murder of Edmund Vane." As the constable approached, Clara's sobs grew quieter, her face a mask of resignation. Grey, his shock giving way to relief, slumped in his chair, muttering, "I never imagined." Wheeler, his silence unbroken, watched as Clara was led away, his expression unreadable. Hastings, his voice low, said to Poirot, "You did it, old chap. That handkerchief was the key, wasn't it?" Poirot's smile was faint, his eyes still fixed on the crimson curtain. "The handkerchief, oui, but also the heart, Hastings. Envy is a subtle poison, and Clara could not resist its call." Japp, clapping his notebook shut, added, "Grey's blackout gave her the chance, and Wheeler's grudge was just a distraction. You've got a knack for this, Poirot." Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression thoughtful. "The theatre, Inspector, is a stage for human passions. Clara played her part, but the little grey cells saw through her performance." As Clara's footsteps faded down the corridor, the auditorium seemed to exhale, the crimson curtain a silent witness to the truth unveiled. Chapter 12. The curtain falls the Gaiety Theatre, its grandeur now softened by the resolution of tragedy, seemed to sigh as the final threads of Edmund Vane's murder were woven into truth. The auditorium, with its rows of empty velvet seats, was bathed in the gentle glow of house lights, casting a warm but sombre light over the crimson curtain, which hung still and heavy across the stage. The air, once thick with suspicion, now carried a quiet finality, as if the theatre itself acknowledged the end of this grim performance. Hercule Poirot, his small figure standing centre stage, radiated a calm authority, his sharp green eyes reflecting the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. Captain Hastings, seated in the front row, leaned back, his honest face a mix of awe and relief. "Poirot," he said, his voice low but fervent, "you've done it again. Clara Beaumont, of all people, an actress turned murderer. I never would have thought her capable, not with that charm." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Mon ami, charm is but a mask, and the heart beneath it can hide dark passions. The little grey cells, they see beyond the surface." Inspector Japp, standing near the orchestra pit, closed his notebook with a decisive snap, his bulldog face softened by a rare grin. "Another feather in your cap, Poirot," he said, his tone warm with admiration. "You had me stumped, I'll admit. That handkerchief, the grease, it all came together like a jigsaw. Clara's confession sealed it." Poirot inclined his head, his expression modest, but pleased. "The truth, Inspector, is like a well-staged play. It requires only the right lighting to be revealed." The stage, now cleared of its chalk outline and bloodstain, seemed almost restored to its former glory, though the memory of Vane's fall lingered in the air. Poirot paced slowly, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the polished boards, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us reflect, mes amis," he said, his voice clear and measured. "This crime was born of envy, a poison that festered in Mademoiselle Beaumont's heart. She stood in the wings, watching Vane's star rise, while hers dimmed. The role of the Scarlet Mask, it was her dream, stolen by his brilliance." Hastings, his brow furrowed, ventured, "But to go from envy to murder, Poirot, that's a leap. She said it was an accident, didn't she?" Poirot's gaze sharpened, his tone firm. "An accident, non. She brought a real dagger, replaced the prop, and struck in the darkness. Her intent may have been to frighten, to make Vane falter, but the heart doesn't lie. Her envy drove her hand, and the result was death." He paused, his eyes drifting to the crimson curtain. "The theatre, it amplifies such passions, turning dreams into obsessions." Japp, scratching his chin, added, "What about Gray and Wheeler? Their alibis held, then?" Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Monsieur Gray's blackout was a coincidence, exploited by Clara's cunning. His frustration with Vane was real, but his passion was for his art, not for blood. As for Monsieur Wheeler, his grudge was old, his silence a shield for his pride, not guilt. Young Davies's sighting placed him near the curtain, but he saw nothing of the act itself. Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "That grease stain, though, it nearly threw us off. If it wasn't Wheeler, how did Clara get it on her hands?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The grease, mon ami, was her error. In the wings, stage left, she steadied herself on a pulley, perhaps to orient herself in the dark before crossing to Vaughan. The handkerchief, used to wipe her hands, carried the trace to her dressing-room, where she hid it in haste. The little grey cells, they saw the connection." Japp chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a marvel, Poirot. Turning a smudge into a confession. Most detectives would have missed it." Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression modest. "It is not the smudge alone, Inspector, but the pattern. The blackout, the dagger, the envy. They formed a tableau, and Hercule Poirot merely arranged the pieces." As they prepared to leave the stage, Poirot paused by the crimson curtain, his fingers brushing its heavy folds. "This theatre," he said softly. "It is a mirror of the soul. It shows us beauty, passion, but also the darkness within. Mademoiselle Beaumont played her part, but the stage revealed her truth." He turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming. "The curtain falls, mon ami, but the truth remains." The Gaiety Theatre, its silence now one of closure rather than suspense, seemed to nod in agreement. The constables had departed, Clara Beaumont was in custody, and the stage was set for new performances, though the memory of the Crimson Curtain's tragedy would linger. Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "You've earned a rest, Poirot. Care for a pint to celebrate?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his tone playful. "A tisane, perhaps, Inspector. Beer. It is not for Hercule Poirot." Hastings, grinning, rose to his feet. "You turned this stage into a courtroom, old chap. Quite the show." Poirot's smile widened, his voice soft but firm. "No, Hastings. The stage was always a courtroom. I merely raised the curtain on justice." As they exited the auditorium, the Crimson Curtain stood silent, its role in the drama complete. The Gaiety Theatre would reopen, its lights would shine again, but the echo of Poirot's triumph would linger, a testament to the power of the little grey cells in unveiling the truth behind the crimson veil.